to start recording this for those who aren't out there. I forgot to hit it earlier. So, yeah, definitely. So hopefully we'll record the entire thing. So, and as you probably noticed in the beginning of the presentation I set out, I just put a medical disclaimer in there just because although like I do want to help everyone as much as I can because I'm not a medical professional yet, I can't officially help everyone in a medical capacity, only an educational one so far. So I just, for legal purposes, had to put.
Busy when you can.
Well, yeah, I will. If I can't see you myself, I will definitely refer you to people who I know in the community who will be good because we've already found some really good people here in the community, either who Jennifer sees or who some of you see as well. There are great physicians out there and nurse practitioners and other health professionals who really do believe RSD exists and want to help. So, like I plan to be going into primary care, which isn't specifically pain management, but I hope to have that in my practice as like a sub sort of area, just because I want to sort of treat all conditions, which I don't know is maybe a bit either naive or a bit I don't know. It's just yeah. Just something I hope to do, but so just for some nomenclature, the current terminology, even though we usually say RSD, oops, is complex regional pain syndrome. RSD is the older name than causalgia, which has been around since the late 1800s. Like the Civil War was first described for people who suffered from similar symptoms of the burning, the stabbing, the shearing pain. And so it's been around for quite a while. In fact, there are even earlier descriptions than that. That was just when it really was coming about more, was during the Civil War with soldiers who were being injured. But so it's a condition that unfortunately has been around for quite a while. But you'll probably hear me more often refer to RSD, but CRPS is the same exact thing. And although the two types, RSD 1 or 2, or CRPS 1 and 2, one has to do with a non-specific nerve injury. Well, type 2 does have to do with a specific nerve injury. However, you'll find people who suffer from the same types of symptoms regardless of whether they're labeled as having type 1 or type 2. So I don't think, although you may see that label, I don't think it's nearly as important because if you've been diagnosed with RSD, it doesn't matter what type you have. You're having the excruciating symptoms. So, I don't know. So just having the diagnosis itself and receiving it in a timely manner is what's most important. But so, just we'll have a few clinical terms just so I should have prefaced some of the information I just kind of threw in here, kind of more for everyone's understandings, either so we're all on the same page, but then also so that when you do talk with healthcare professionals, some of the terms they may use, if they don't explain them, I wanted you to at least have some sort of reference to either come back to or hopefully understand now, because a lot of medical terminology can be very confusing and very challenging to deal with, and it makes you feel inferior. Like it happens to me still nowadays. I hear terms that I have no idea what they mean. I have to look them up immediately, usually 10 or 15 times to remember them. So there will be a lot of clinical terms in here, but I hope to explain it to a degree where everyone can understand it, because I don't know, when you talk to healthcare professionals, they should explain everything to you about what they mean, even if they use the big words that for me are confusing. So the different scales of pain, either being acute, subacute, or chronic, usually have to do with the time length. So usually when there's that first injury that someone may develop RSD from, it'll be the acute first 30 days, which is like the ideal time to start treating the condition. However, unfortunately for most people, it does become chronic. So that's usually for more than 6 months. This is just a little bit about the difference between someone's threshold and tolerance. Threshold being the most minimal amount of pain that someone can actually detect. Like if someone was just to kind of scrape their finger, I shouldn't even say scrape, rub their finger along you, that would be your pain threshold, versus tolerance would be the maximum amount that someone can tolerate or someone can bear. And we'll get more into this later, somatic versus visceral pain. The somatic pain usually refers to pain that is on the body wall or along someone's more body surface, while visceral pain, viscera actually is our organs. So let's say if someone was in a car accident, they could experience both visceral and somatic pain. The somatic pain would be, let's say they were in the car and they hit the steering wheel. The somatic pain would be right along their body. The visceral pain would be maybe either the heart or stomach or lungs that were injured. And both types of pain can be very, very painful, for lack of a better term, though there are more descriptors for each type, like visceral being more difficult to determine exactly where it is. Like, let's say one of your lungs was injured. The lung, because it's such a large area, it can be difficult to determine if you're experiencing pain right here, if it is the lung, if it's the heart, if it's what's called the mediastinum or sternum. It's right here, so it can be difficult what causes it, versus if it was just one of your ribs, which is more along the body wall. So that'll relate to sort of things later on. And the neuropathic pain is something that many of you experience. It's due to actual nerve injury. So like we sort of talked about, the burning, the stinging, more stabbing type pain versus other types of pain, which I sort of put in here, but I'm going to sort of gloss through because it's not a big deal. And psychogenic pain is something that I just sort of put in there because a lot of health professionals refer to it. As you'll see later on, I included some studies in here that show that RSD is not really a psychogenic type of condition. There are certain psychological conditions that someone could complain of pain and they're doing it for like either fictitious disorder, or you've heard of Munchausen or things like that, or malingering. Those are conditions that are labeled out there. There have been studies that have shown that RSD is not even close to anything like that. So when they say something is all in your head, the only way that that could be true is if the actual nerves themselves are injured and it's not something made up. But psychogenic or psychologic pain is something that can be labeled with someone with RSD. However, like I said, there are studies that have shown that it's not at all true. These are just different descriptors for types of pain. One that I just wanted to talk about a little bit was allodynia, being when usually something minor affecting someone, like possibly bending their finger back, would cause an excruciating, or just bending it back like this, not bending it back to past the functional barriers. But a more minor type of pain could cause excruciating pain for someone, which unfortunately is something that many people with RSD do experience. And we'll talk a little bit about that. This is just a bit of a graphic I sort of threw in there to kind of help explain what's happening. Normally, noxious just means like an injuring type of stimulus will cause some sort of type of response. If I had one of those pointers, I could show it a little easier without getting in the way. But so some sort of stimulus causes a pain-invoked response, but someone with a pain condition will usually experience what's called hyperalgesia, meaning that the pain is intensified. And then allodynia, like we said, not only is it intensified, but a very minimal stimulus will elicit a very painful response. Let's see. So yeah, these are just some things I sort of threw in here for your own knowledge, but I didn't want to focus too much on it. The McGill Pain Scale, or the McGill Pain Index, is something that's been around for quite a while. That just tries to help quantify, both for patients as well as healthcare professionals, someone's pain level. Usually in the emergency room or something like that, you'll hear like a 0 to 10 pain scale, and that's just like a quick rating to kind of determine where someone is at. But the McGill Pain Index is something that's been studied and researched to determine, and although we don't like to compare people to one another, but just to kind of rank and figure out where everyone's at. And consistently, RSD or CRPS has been at the very top of the rankings, because we've seen that RSD pain is excruciating, more so than childbirth, more so than fractures, more so than anything. Oops. Excuse me, sorry. The only reason I brought these actually were just for one quick clip, so I should probably leave them out until I actually play it so I don't break everything. But yeah, so causalgia, unfortunately this one had up here, but the other one on the other side shows RSD or CRPS being at the top of the scale for both types. And these are some of the different studies that have been done demonstrating just how severe the pain can be in RSD or CRPS. So, some anatomy, physiology. Oh,
Can you speak up?
oh I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I do have a quiet voice. Yeah, if you can't hear me, please say something because Jennifer often asks me to speak up because I do have a quiet voice. Also, I mean, all this is more of a lecture. If you do have questions on the material at any time, if something is confusing, like even the littlest bit, please go ahead and ask because, again, some of this information is going to be rather clinical, and I may explain it what I think as well. But if you don't feel like you're understanding the information, please go ahead and tell me because I'm sure if one person's not understanding it, a lot of people aren't. So feel free to ask as many questions as you'd like. So this is just a brief breakdown of our nervous systems, how they are. The central nervous system is what we think of as our brain and spinal cord. The peripheral nervous system are the nerves that extend out from the brain and spinal cord. We have our cranial nerves, which are in the brain itself, they extend from, and then our spinal nerves, which turn into the peripheral nerves in our body. And so if you injure your hand, I'll probably use mostly as an example, that'll be the peripheral nervous system, which sends signals up to the brain to process the information. That information, which is the central nervous system, is shot back down to the peripheral to invoke a response. If you have your hand on the stove, it's very hot, is a classic example, and you feel the burning pain from that. The signals are sent from your fingers up to the brain. It's processed saying that, ouch, that hurts, and then information is sent back down to pull away from it. So that's a peripheral to central to peripheral response. So this is just a brief breakdown of that. The afferent nerves are the sensory type nerves that actually sense that pain. The efferent nerves are the ones that the information is sent back down to. So I'll kind of refer back to either a sensory or motor. That just means afferent or efferent type of nerves, but I'll try to do some sensory or motor. I'm just going to go to the next slide because it kind of says this in words. Let's see. Yeah, central and peripheral. The central nervous system being made up mostly, the reason I'll talk about this is because later on it has to do with some information. The central nervous system is mostly made up of neurons, which you will hear of as nerve cells when you classically hear of them. And then glial cells are another type of cell which make up actually most of the cells in our nervous system. They comprise about 90% of them. So when you think of your nerves, that's only like 10% of what's made up. And we'll kind of talk about what happens. The glial cells are usually, you might hear of like the glue of our nervous system because it keeps them together, it keeps them functioning, it keeps them working. And there are a few different types of cells. And then the peripheral, like I said, we'll go ahead and talk about right now. There are different kind of controllers for the peripheral nervous system. So there's actually the somatic and autonomic are considered part, well no, they're part of the peripheral nervous system. They're controlled by the central, but we'll just say they're peripheral nervous system. So the somatic nervous system doesn't have a whole lot to do with RSD, but it's the more voluntary type of responses that we have. If we think like I want to move my arm, that's the somatic nervous system. We're actually thinking that out. We're actually intentionally controlling it. Well, the autonomic nervous system, you can think of it as automatic. These are reflexes that happen without us even thinking about it at all. So our breathing, our heart rate, our blood pressure, all of that is considered the autonomic or automatic nervous system. And that's also divided into two others to make it a bit more complicated. But there's the sympathetic and parasympathetic, which has to do more with RSD itself. The sympathetic is nicknamed our fight or flight nervous system. The parasympathetic is our rest and digest. So when, a classic example is when we were cavemen thousands of years ago and the saber-toothed tiger was chasing after us. The sympathetic nervous system was the one that was really kicked into high gear.